All right, cool. So we'll just go through this really kind of quickly together. So I went through this stuff talking about what you should know basically beforehand and what you should know afterwards. Okay, yeah, I'm having a hard time. There we go. And some things you'll learn at the end of the course. So there's a video here. So we're gonna watch that. Hopefully this will work pretty well with y'all considering it's sharing the screen. Is it mirrored though?
It's normal. It's all right.
Okay, cool. I was making sure. The camera's the only thing that's mirrored, but I just want to make sure. So, all right. Maybe y'all can hear this right decently.
Welcome to the PC Pro course. In this course, we're going to talk about computer systems, how they work, how to maintain them, and how to repair them. This course is designed for anyone who wants to increase their computer skills and knowledge.
Is that okay for y'all at home?
Sounds fine.
Okay, cool.
Even if you're just starting out. Employers search for IT professionals with valid, real-world skills. So we'll teach you the knowledge and skills they look for so that you can begin your career in computers. Before we go any further, it's important that you understand the prerequisites for this course. We're assuming that you already know a few basic things about computers. First, we'll assume that you know how to turn a computer on. You should know how to interact with the computer using a mouse and a keyboard. And we expect that you know how to run basic applications on a computer system. For example, you should be able to turn on a PC, open Microsoft Word, open a particular document, make changes to the document, and save the changes. We're also going to assume that you understand how to use a web browser and an email client to access information on the internet. Those are all prerequisites for this course. The purpose of this course is to provide you with the equivalent knowledge of an entry-level computer technician with about 12 months of on-the-job experience. To do that, we're going to go over these topics. First, we'll discuss how computers and operating systems work. We'll review a computer technician's job role, how they spend their time, and how they should act on the job. We'll discuss the components that comprise a computer system. We'll take a look at storage, motherboards, processors, memory, and so on. We'll also discuss how to manage computer storage, how to make sure data is stored safely and securely, and how to make it accessible. We'll also discuss some computer networking basics. We won't discuss them in much depth, though. If you want to learn more about computer networking, you should take the Network Pro course and get your Network Pro certification. We'll just give you a brief introduction. We'll also discuss how to manage printing and mobile devices, a very important aspect of managing computer systems, and we'll introduce you to virtualization and cloud computing. Then we'll move away from hardware and discuss the software that runs on a computer system. We'll discuss how to manage desktop operating systems. We'll talk about how to implement a computer system from a hardware and software perspective, and how to manage files in the file system. Then we'll look at how to secure desktop systems. Specifically, we'll discuss how to make sure that the right people are able to access the right information. And throughout the course, you'll learn how to troubleshoot common computer problems. LabSim provides several features designed to help you learn and retain basic computing concepts. Each section provides you with videos and demonstrations that teach you how to perform necessary tasks. Fact sheets help reinforce the concepts taught in the videos, and interactive hands-on labs let you practice the skills you've learned. Within each section, you'll find practice questions to test your knowledge. At the end of the course, you'll find both a PC Pro certification practice exam and A+ practice exams. These exams will help you prepare for certification. Consider using the exams as a pre-test at the beginning of the course to determine how much you already know about computing. Then, as a post-test, retake the exams at the end of the course to see how much you've learned. You can also test your knowledge by taking the domain tests. The domain tests divide test questions up according to the domain objectives in the certification exams. It's another way to practice and reinforce basic computing concepts. Now let's talk about your certification, because that's really the goal of this course, to provide you with the information you need to become industry certified as a PC technician. Certification is important if you plan to have a career in the IT industry. Certification provides two benefits. First, it gives employers critical information they need to make hiring decisions. Second, it gives you an edge in the job application process because employers look for certification. This course meets the specifications for two different industry certification programs, the Test Out PC Pro certification and the CompTIA A+ certification. The Test Out PC Pro certification measures how much you know and what you can do. The PC Pro cert validates that you have the equivalent knowledge of a computer technician with about 1 year of work experience. It demonstrates that you know the basics of how computers work, how to install, configure, and troubleshoot computer hardware, and how to install, configure, and troubleshoot networking connections. In addition to that, PC Pro takes things a step further by emphasizing real-world job skills. In order to get your PC Pro certification, you won't answer a whole bunch of multiple choice questions. You'll perform real-world tasks. The A+ certification is an international certification program created by the Computing Technology Industry Association, or CompTIA. The CompTIA A+ certification covers generic PC concepts. It's not focused on one particular vendor's hardware or software. The A+ certification program tests how much you know. It doesn't focus on what you can do. The online exam is composed of multiple choice questions. The A+ certification is composed of two different exams. The first exam is 220-1001, which tests your knowledge of mobile devices, networking, computer hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. The 220-1002 exam tests your knowledge of operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So, as you can see, the A+ certification works hand in hand with the PC Pro certification to verify that you know what a computer technician should know and can do what a computer technician needs to do in their job. With this introduction in mind, it's time for you to start learning about how computers work. In this video, we introduced you to the PC Pro course, the course audience and prerequisite, the topics covered in this course, and the certifications that this course will help you achieve.
So there's your basic overview of the course. Here is how to use the simulator. I guess we'll watch that real quick too. It's 14 minutes long.
Test Out's lab activities are key to your training. In this demonstration,
Just bear with us while we do this. People online and here, we just got to get through this so we can understand how to use all the equipment within the use all this these programs within this website.
I'm going to show you the components of the lab simulator so that you can successfully complete the lab activities in this course. The lab has four main areas. Over here on the left is a scenario window. The scenario window is very important. The scenario describes the task you're required to perform during the lab activity. Typically, the items in this bullet list provide you with all the tasks that you're going to be evaluated on. Therefore, you'll be expected to perform these tasks correctly as you go through the lab. If you need more space while you're working, you can hide the scenario window by clicking this button right here. And you can click on it a second time to bring it back. The main area where you're going to do most of your work is called the workspace. It includes all the items you'll work with and configure. For example, in this simulation, we have a computer system and we have a keyboard. If we scroll to the side, we also have a mouse. We have wall plates with connectors for cable internet, for the network, telephone, and for AC power over here on the far left. And there's a power strip that we can plug things into. In addition to the scenario and the workspace, we also have the shelf. The shelf holds pieces of equipment organized by category. Right now, we have cables and monitors. These are objects you'll use to complete configuration tasks over in the workspace. You can think of the shelf as your inventory of spare parts, or an online ordering system where you can order parts that you need. Now, let's go through the process of completing a lab. The first thing you need to do is read the scenario. Read it very carefully because when you're done, you're evaluated on whether you did everything it asks you to do. Then you need to examine the objects within the workspace. You can use this slider to zoom in and out if you need to. You can also use the zoom out and zoom in buttons or the drop-down list here. Before we go any further, I need to point out that each object within the workspace occupies a certain amount of space, which is denoted by the outline that surrounds each object. For example, this is the area for the power strip. This is the area for the computer. This is the area for the keyboard. This is the area for the mouse. And this is the area for the wall plates. Within each of these windows, there are several buttons that allow us to change the perspective of view for that object. I'm currently looking at the front of the computer, but let's suppose I need to do some work on the back of the computer. I can come up here and click the back button, and when I do, I can see all the various connectors that are implemented on the back of the computer. If I need to see the front of the computer again, say to power it on, I can click the front button. You'll notice that not all of the objects have multiple views. The computer does, but the keyboard only has one view, the top view. You're not stuck with this layout within the workspace. You can rearrange the objects in the workspace to make them more convenient to work with. For example, I can grab the keyboard and move it to the other side of the computer. Let's move the mouse as well. There are some objects that you can't move within the workspace. For example, I can't move this wall plate because, well, it's a wall plate. It's mounted to the wall to replicate a real wall plate. But you can move objects around the fixed items. For example, I can move the computer to the other side of the wall plate. So once you familiarize yourself with the items within the workspace, you need to go over here to the shelf and use the categories displayed to find the objects required to complete the scenario. If you're looking at an item on the shelf and you're not really sure what it is, or you need a better idea of how it functions, you can click on the details link for that object. For example, I can click on the details link for the video cable here. When I do, an overview of the cable is displayed. Notice for this particular object, we can see the cable itself. We can see each connector, and I can look at the front, back, and top of the connector. Also notice that when I click an item on the shelf, it's displayed down here in the selected component window. And we can access the same information using the details links down here. Being able to view the details of a particular object on the shelf is very useful because it helps you to verify the object you selected is actually the correct object for the particular requirements of the scenario. And I should point out here that with some objects, when you view their details, you'll see an additional tab called the Specifications tab, which opens a window that provides more information. Right now, we don't have an object on the shelf or in the workspace that has the Specification tab, but some do. For example, a motherboard will have a Specifications tab. The information in the Specifications tab is similar to what you might find in a user manual for that particular item. The information in the Specifications tab is similar to what you might find in a user manual for that particular item. Go ahead and close this window. Before we can work with an object within the workspace, we have to add it to the workspace or connect it to an item that's already there. For example, to add this monitor to the workspace, we'll expand monitors and then drag it over here. Notice when I do this, you can see yellow lines appear that tell me where I can drop the monitor in relation to the other objects that are already within the workspace. So in this case, I want to add the monitor to the workspace right next to the PC system itself. So I'm going to drop it right here. And now that object is added to the workspace. Once the object is in the workspace, I can manipulate it to accomplish the tasks in the scenario. In this example, I need to look at the back of the monitor, and I need to use cables to connect this monitor to the computer system and the power outlet. Let's look at the back of the computer as well as the monitor. By doing this, I can see the various connectors that are implemented on the monitor and on the PC system. With this done, now I need to use the appropriate cables to connect these two devices together and connect the monitor to the power outlet. Let's go over here and expand cables. And let's connect the monitor to the computer system using a video cable. I can click on the video cable so that it appears down here in the selected components window. Let's grab each connector and add it to the appropriate port on the back of the computer and on the back of the monitor. Let's drag this connector to the monitor. Notice here that there are 3 different ports available on the monitor, and as I hover over each port, it's outlined in blue. That blue rectangle tells me this is a potential place where you could connect this particular device. It doesn't mean it's the right connector, it just means that it's an option you could use. In this case, I'm dealing with an HDMI connector. So I need to make sure that I drag and drop it onto an HDMI port right here. I'll release the mouse, and now one end of the connector is connected to the monitor. If we look at the status of the connector down here, you can see that one end is now connected to the monitor. The other end is still unconnected. And notice when I did that, the partial connections window is displayed. You'll always see this partial connection window when one end of a cable is connected, but the other end isn't connected to anything. Now we need to connect the other end of the cable to the PC system. So I'm going to click and drag. And just like the other end of the cable, I need to pick the right port to connect it to. And now it's connected. Once again, the status of the cable is updated down here in the selected components window. One end is connected to the computer and the other to the monitor. Now you might be wondering, what happens if I drop this connector on an incompatible connector? Well, when you do, an error is displayed down here saying, hey, you can't connect that there. Let's go ahead and put it back on the correct port. So that's one way you can connect devices together using an item from the shelf. There's another way to do it as well, and that's to drag the cable directly from the shelf and then drop it onto the appropriate connector. In this case, I'm going to drag the power connector and I'm going to drop it on the power socket on the monitor. Now notice that this cable has two different connectors. We have a female connector and a male connector. The simulator doesn't know which end of that cable I want to connect to this particular connector on the monitor. It brings up a list of possibilities and I have to tell it which one I want to use. Let's go ahead and use the AC power female connector. And that end is now connected to the monitor itself. And let's plug the other end into the power strip. So at this point, we've applied power to the monitor and we've connected it to the PC. Now let's go ahead and switch to the front view of the monitor and the front view of the PC. And just like in real life, before I can connect either of these components, I have to turn them on. Let's turn on the monitor. If you hover over the power button, you'll notice that it's highlighted in blue. I'm going to click it to turn the monitor on. Let's go over to the computer and power it on as well. When I do, the system comes on and we switch to the operating system view of the computer. And as you can see, we have a full simulated Windows environment. It's not a real Windows system, it's a simulated Windows desktop. However, it does function in pretty much the same way a real Windows desktop would. For example, I could come over here to the Start button and click on it. When I do, all of the things that you would expect to see in the Start menu are displayed. For example, I have my settings. I can view a list of the installed applications on the system. I have my tiles over here. I can come down and search for Control Panel and go up and click on it. When I do, Control Panel is displayed just like it would be on a real Windows system. And using the various links in the Control Panel, I can go ahead and configure this simulated workstation. For example, I could go down here to Hardware and Sound, and I could use this link right here to add a new printer to the system. The steps that you need to take within the simulation are exactly the same ones that you would need to take on a real Windows system. Now, I do need to point out that as you go through the lab exercise, you'll see that not everything in the Windows interface is going to be enabled. If a feature isn't necessary for a lab, it's not enabled. The components you do need to complete the scenario will be enabled. Now, while the computer is on and running, you can switch back to the workspace and view the hardware by clicking on the hardware button for a particular device. This will switch you between the different views. Now, in addition to moving objects from the shelf into the workspace, I can do just the opposite. I can take an object that's currently in the workspace and return it back to the shelf. To do this, all you have to do is click on the object, like the monitor here, and then drag it over to the shelf and drop it. Notice that when I do this, an error message is displayed. It's basically telling us, hey, I can't be moved back to the shelf because I'm still plugged in. It's connected to the power cable. And it's also connected to the DVI cable. And it's warning us that if we fail to unplug all these cables, we can't put it back on the shelf. This is also simulating real life. You wouldn't grab a monitor that still had a power cable and video cable connected to it and drop it on the shelf, right? Before we can put this item back on the shelf, we've got to unplug everything. Click OK here. To unplug a cable, simply click on it, drag it off, and drop it somewhere within the workspace. For example, if I unplug the power cable from the back of the monitor, we see that its status changes to unconnected. We have to do the same thing with the video cable. I'll click it, drag it off, drop it, and its status changes to unconnected as well. At this point, there are no more connections to the monitor, so I can drop it back over here on the shelf. And please be aware that there are some items that you can't move to the shelf. A good example would be the wall plate connectors. Just as in real life, you couldn't grab a wall plate connector, rip it out of the wall, and put it on the shelf, at least not very easily. You can't do that in a simulation either. Now, once you've completed all the tests in the scenario, you're ready to submit the lab for evaluation. However, I recommend that before you do this, you go back over your scenario and quickly review all the tasks that you've been expected to complete and double check to make sure that everything's done as required. Once you've identified that you've done everything that was required, go up here and click Done. When you do, it's going to evaluate whether or not you did everything correctly. Notice here we have a list of tasks that I was required to perform by the scenario. It is listed here under Task Summary. Over here, we have an icon that tells me whether or not I did each one. If I didn't do a particular task, I see a red X. If I did complete a task, it would be denoted with a green icon. Now notice in this scenario, I didn't do everything that was required. I initially had the monitor on the workspace, but I took it off, so it evaluated as incorrect. And because I unplugged the monitor's video cable and power cable, well, I got those wrong as well. Now, this last task is actually a multi-item task, meaning I had to complete several different subtasks in order to get this task correct. To see what those subtasks are, I click on Show Details, and it tells me I needed to turn on the computer. I did that, notice the green icon, but I'm also supposed to turn on the monitor. I got that wrong. Why? Because I originally had it on, but then I turned it off and put it back on the shelf. And as a result, I didn't get it right. Now down here, under the task summary, is the explanation. The explanation part of the lab report provides step-by-step instructions for actually completing the tasks in the scenario. There are, of course, many ways to complete some of these tasks. The steps listed here provide just one suggested way. Go ahead and click Done. Now I'm going to pause the recording while I restart the lab. Before we end this demonstration, there's one more thing I want to show you. Come over here in the scenario. It tells us that once we've completed the tasks in the scenario, feel free to explore the hardware and operating system interfaces within the lab. You can click Floor 1 Overview to review the rest of the Office network right here. Understand that this computer is just one system within an entire Office complex. If you want to view the other systems within the Office, you can click on the Floor 1 Overview. When I do, I see a floor plan of the organization, and each room in the floor plan has a name. I'm currently in IT administration. I know that because the name of the room is in yellow. Within each room, there's a list of the hardware and operating systems running in that office. For example, in Office 1, we have a computer. It's running Windows, and the name of the system is Office 1. Over here in the networking closet, we have a server running, and its name is Corp Server. I can use all of these icons to switch to either the hardware or the operating system view for the computer equipment in these different locations. That's it for this demonstration. In this demo, we looked at the Test.Lab simulator. We began by looking at the four main areas of the lab interface. Then we talked about how to manipulate objects within those four areas. And then we ended this demonstration by talking about how to change locations within the simulation interface.
Cool. Here's the text. Okay, so we did all that. Okay, so we'll get to that later. I'm trying to work out getting some temporary volumes for now, so y'all can kind of chill for now. For those in the Zoom, we're done for the day. So, because we go to lunch in less than 15 minutes. So, all right. Y'all have any questions for me? I want to get more information out to you shortly about all this temporary stuff. It might end up even being tomorrow, Thursday. Everybody good? All right. Sounds good.